around the room and having a chance to visit with so many of you that came out tonight, so many women and men that have made a significant contribution to our community, to Central Florida, really around the state. And you have made our communities better places to live, to raise families, to do business, and we are absolutely grateful for the service that you provide. I love evenings like this that we have tonight because we have the opportunity to give honor to whom honor is due. We have the privilege tonight to recognize and celebrate an incredible legacy. The legacy of our dear friend and servant of this great state, Bill Nelson, over, I think, yes. Chance to do a podcast with him prior to our evening together, and I heard him say he's been at full throttle, choice words, for 42 years, and we are grateful for that contribution in every which way that he has served, from the House to the Senate, and of course serving as an astronaut, expanding our knowledge and our awareness of really the unknown, and so many wonderful things that he has used his gifts, his talents, and passion to really serve all of us. I think he has exemplified what it means to first and foremost serve people, to take time to always listen, to learn, to discover what's at the heart of our issues and challenges, so that he can do his best to together work with those that have been elected, and they collaborate and they find solutions that help us in the way of life that we get to experience. And we are grateful for that, and that's why we feel it is such an honor for us to be able to honor him tonight. Our country, our state has been blessed significantly by his influence, and we are grateful. You know, we are fortunate to live in a nation founded on the idea that everyone's voice matters in solving our challenges and solving the issues that we face. There have been so many human cultures and societies where good women and men have been forced to sit on the sidelines. In fact, many that are outright killed because they actually stand up for liberty and freedom and justice and fairness. And that's why I'm so grateful that we live in a nation, as well as I know you are. We live in a country where we can read right in our preamble, in our Constitution, that our country, our nation, the United States, was absolutely founded. Why? To establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, provide for the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. We can never lose sight of that truth, that our nation and our society will always function best when we, her citizens, engage with our government, engage with our elected representatives, so that we together can serve and address the tremendous challenges that always face us as an ever-growing nation and country. And we have the privilege to teach the next generation. We need to empower them to understand the importance that they cannot afford to sit on the sidelines when it comes to leadership in our nation. I believe the 40th president said it well when he said, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. Ronald Reagan went on to say, "It is not ours by inheritance, but it must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it only comes to us once." That's important. That should encourage us and challenge us, that the generation that is growing up, the generation that we have a front row seat right here at Southeastern University to see their passion, their desire, their calling to make a difference. We have a great desire to come alongside them and teach them the importance of fighting for our individual freedoms, fighting for the American values that have always made this country a great nation. I want to tell you, Senator Nelson, you have embodied those values every single day that you have served this state. And I want to say it's also great to have Mrs. Nelson with us tonight. Grace, thank you for being here. Your son as well for joining us tonight, because I know family is a value to you, an important value, and you have also displayed how it is to balance life with family. And Grace has been with you every step of the way. And thank you for serving as well, and the contribution that you've made alongside Senator Nelson. There is another person in this room that I now have the privilege to introduce to you this evening, who is also absolutely passionate and dedicated and committed to defending our individual freedoms and, of course, teaching and empowering this next generation about the American political process and how exciting that process can be. That is our former congressman and now distinguished professor, Congressman Dennis Ross. Grateful that he is with us at Southeastern University. Last year when Congressman Ross announced that he was not seeking re-election, after I went through my depression over that because he has served so well. But I don't think I waited, Congressman Ross, 5 minutes before I reached out to you and I said, we have a place for you at Southeastern University. I knew that you could bring tremendous mentoring leadership and influence to this generation who needs to hear your value and your commitment to be a leader who always embodies the values of our nation, but also embodies what it means to reach across the aisle and collaborate and come together so that we, no matter what our political views, we can work to create the solutions that will make it a better place for all of us to live. And he shares those values. And I know many of our students, including my own son, Davis, who served in your office, started out as an intern and then later worked for you on legislative issues. But so many of them have always returned to this community and to Southeastern. So grateful to have served under you and always talked about how you took time to really speak into their lives and mentor them, and really how you opened the doors for so many of them to have great careers, and we are grateful to that. He shares again all the wonderful things that we hope will be captured by our students as they journey through their educational experience. And I knew that our community would be grateful to have someone at the helm of the American Center for Political Leadership. We are grateful that you are now leading the way and directing that cause. So would you welcome former Congressman Dennis Ross, a distinguished professor.
Thank you and good evening. And just before we begin our program with our introduction video, I would be remiss if I didn't ask my very good friend, who has been a very positive influence in my life, despite the fact that he defeated me in an election. Former state senator and former candidate for governor, Rick Dancer, please come join me. Now, if I could draw your attention to the video screen, we would like to begin our program.
The very core of our mission at the ACPL is to protect individual freedoms, to cultivate civic engagement, and to advance political civility. As I witnessed firsthand in my own career as a congressman, civility and statesmanship are qualities that are desperately needed, yet rarely exhibited in our political process today. However, my colleague, Bill Nelson, has embodied these ideals for the duration of his career and continues to do so to this day. In the course of his 40 years in public service, Senator Nelson exhibited those values, and despite the differences of opinion that are inherent to public office, the one constant is that he is always a statesman, a true Floridian, a champion of the people. His achievements are many, from crossing the aisle to ensure the best possible outcomes of legislation, to actually traveling to space. To fully appreciate the depth and breadth of the influence of this great leader, we're going to take a look back at his distinguished career. And we will hear from our colleagues from both sides of the aisle that have worked with him and have been positively impacted by the work of Senator Nelson.
Well, congratulations to my friend and longtime colleague Bill Nelson on his well-deserved award after 40 years of public service to our state. I enjoyed our partnership and our time working together, and I'm looking forward to seeing the contributions you are making and will continue to make to Florida and Floridians for years to come. So, Bill, congrats.
The deep love for protecting our environment. Bill is a champion for affordable health care, quality education, always putting the needs of the Sunshine State first. From his start in the halls of the Florida House of Representatives and through his time in the U.S. Senate, Senator Nelson never stopped working for the people. Congratulations on this wonderful achievement, Bill. You're a dear friend, and it's an honor to speak on your behalf. God bless you.
Bill has served his state of Florida as well as the country with incredible distinction, integrity, and honor. He's proven that you can be civil with one another, you can forge consensus whenever possible on behalf of our state. He's a model for what the future should hold in Washington, D.C. My hope and prayer is that that type of civility can be restored in Washington, and what a model Bill Nelson has been. God bless you, Bill. Congratulations on your public service.
Hello, Senator Nelson, and congratulations as you're recognized today for 40 years of incredible public service to the people of the state of Florida. When I think of Senator Nelson, I think first and foremost of character and integrity, high ethical standards, and also of the fact that you have Florida in your heart. And we are so pleased that we have the great benefit of having Senator Bill Nelson as our representative in Washington, D.C. for so many years.
I've known of Bill Nelson since he served in the House of Representatives when I was just in high school. I have followed his career with a little bit of envy, and not because he was a Democrat, because I was a Republican, but I followed it because he was always the consummate statesman that I think others who seek to go into political office should emulate. It is absolutely phenomenal to have the friendship that I have and that my wife has with his wife, and to be able to recognize him for a phenomenal career, not only on behalf of the people of Florida, but definitely on all of Americans for his service to this country.
That video we think does the best introduction, and with that, I would like to introduce to you United States Senator Bill Nelson. Before we begin our program, we want to recognize you with some hardware to take home, because you see, at the ACPL, one of the things that we've talked about is when I talk to my students and I talk to others, I say, who would you emulate? Where are the political heroes? And there's silence because we don't recognize real statesmanship. We don't recognize real commitment to public service. And we don't recognize that it's not just a passing fashion, but it's a career of longevity, of knowing what's good for the greater good. And to be here and share with my good friend Rick Dancer makes it all that much more important. And so Rick, I'm going to let you close and we'll present.
Well, thank you, Dennis. It's a real pleasure for me to be here as well. And I was honored when you contacted me about perhaps co-sponsoring this event with you, or at least co-moderating it. Very happy to be here. I've known Senator Nelson all of my political life. I started when I was 26 and I'm 63 now, so that goes back quite some time. And I have to say that on those few occasions when I would disagree with him regarding a particular issue, I never worried about it. And I didn't worry about it because I always knew he was properly motivated. In this day and age, when you have to wonder how some people are motivated or what motivates them, I never worried about that with Senator Nelson. His love for Florida, his love for the United States was what drove his service. So, Senator, thank you very much for 42 years. I had this sneaking suspicion, though, that while you may have earned some time off, I don't think you're going to turn your motor off yet. And I just hope that your contribution to our state and our nation is not over. And I have this feeling that it's not. So thank you very much. This is a well-deserved night. Thank you for your 42 years of service.
Picture and then we'll...
Rocky's always last.
And we can set that back down and I'll let you take the seat and we will begin our program. Rick, I'm going to defer to you. Unless, of course, you'd like to make any opening statements.
Well, I'm glad that you noticed Grace and our son, Bill Jr. And I also want to introduce you to our second family, which was our Senate family. And several of them came here tonight. These were the folks who did the work. So would you all stand up and take a bow? Welcome.
Well, good deal. I guess I'm supposed to kick this off, so let me tell you what we're going to do tonight. When Congressman Ross and I talked about this, we thought that it was best to stay away from issues. But of course, Senator, if you would like to get into issues, that's certainly your prerogative. But we thought that with the political climate as it is today, we thought that would be a good place to start, and we'd just see where it goes. And I have prepared a few questions. I know that there have been a number of questions submitted by those of you in the audience. So we'll try to get to as many of those as we can and just have some fun tonight. So one of the questions that I had kind of right out of the gate, when you were running in your last election, I went to an event for you in Orlando, and I heard you make the comment that in this political environment, as crazy as it seems, up is down and down is up. And I thought about that a lot, and I wonder what you meant by that.
Because it is. I mean, what you would normally expect in the body politic of the functioning of the Constitution, the gentlemanly way that in order to carry on a dialogue in the public discourse, in the public arena, there has to be a modicum of civility. And we don't see a lot of that. And it's getting worse. And And it didn't just start with this last administration. I've seen it very much change over the 18 years that I was in the Senate. I've especially seen it change since those early days of going to the state legislature, where all of us would go up there, and those of us who had young children would all bring them up for the 2 months of the session, and we'd rent apartments, and our kids would be in and out of everybody else's apartment, and it didn't make any difference whether you were an R or a D. We were all friends, and then we'd go out at night for supper. And that was an accepted way of doing the public's business. Now, that was back in the dark ages. That was in the 70s, and yet I saw that continue in my days in the House. For example, Tip O'Neill, the Speaker, and Bob Michael, the top Republican, they'd fight like cats and dogs, but at the end of the day, they were personal friends. And so when it came time to do the deal, taught in college campuses about public service, one of the case studies is 1983. Social Security was within 6 months of going bankrupt. The president was Ronald Reagan. The speaker was Tip O'Neill. 2 old Irishmen that used to fight all the time, but they had a personal friendship too. And they decided, we're going to solve this now. Social Security was a deadly issue. If you dare vote on any cuts on Social Security, you could be sure that your opponent in the next election was going to take you out. But Social Security was going bankrupt in 6 months. Those 2 old Irishmen got together and they said, we're going to solve this thing, and we're going to take it off the table in the next election as something to beat your opponent over the head with. They said, we're going to appoint a special blue ribbon committee. They're going to come back and report to the Congress. We passed it overwhelmingly. It made Social Security, that was almost bankrupt, financially sound, actuarially sound for the next half century. Now, there is a good example of getting something done and something successful. But can you imagine that being done today? So you see the changes that have occurred, and it all comes back to the personal relationship and how do you get along with each other. I told Bill Rufty earlier tonight, I said, go back and see what Marco Rubio said immediately after my farewell address. And one of the things that he told, funny things, that the Senate just broke up laughing when he said it. He said, you know the worst thing Bill Nelson ever said about me? He said I was a moderate.
That's great.
And so, you know, that's the kind of relationship that we need.
What happened? What caused it to change?
Well, a number of things. Again, not talking about the present situation, because each of you have your ideas about that. And I think there are some unconventional things that are going on. But you have to go back to, in the old days, before I ever arrived in Congress, when Congress was in session and there wasn't the jet airplane, and the members took their families to Washington, and they all got to know each other as human beings. It was so much easy to do that relationship. And yet, we've had political combat ever since the beginning of the country. Of course, if you've been interested in Hamilton because of the musical, you know how he and Jefferson and then he and Burr, they ended up settling on a dual field, even though Hamilton shot in the air. We've had that throughout the ages, sharp political debate. But at the end of the day, you got to do something. And you've got to have an environment in which to work it. So along the way, what's happened is that members don't go to Washington. They're there Tuesday through Thursday and they're gone. They don't build those relationships. Everything is structured around the two parties. One of the few times that the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate met together was in the immediate aftermath of September the 11th. And we all got together in the Senate dining room. And there were a lot of tears, and we deferred to the senators from the states that had been attacked. And there was unity. I remember when the Capitol Police kept saying, "Don't come back," after we had all evacuated Capitol Hill. We all wanted to come back. And we all ended up spontaneously on the steps of the east front steps, and spontaneously broke out in singing "God Bless America." So there was unifying moments, but they are less and less frequent. Another thing, Rick, that's contributed to it is the gerrymandering of districts. Now that's not so in the Senate, but it's certainly true in the House. If a congressional district does not represent the overall composition of the area and is drawn with a computer to slice and dice the precincts to determine the outcome of the general election, which you can determine with computers, then you have just one point of view. What you need as a representative of the country is a lot of points of view, and then when you go to Washington, your point of view is not the only one. You ought to be listening to the other people and their point of view. Geographical, philosophical, religious, racial, the whole bit. And yet, we are constantly dividing instead of unifying. And that is what the structures increasingly are promoting.
Have gerrymandered districts made it more difficult to govern from the middle?
Absolutely. And when you have to govern, you're usually going to govern between the 40-yard lines. But if the fellow beyond the 40-yard line and the other party is saying it's my way or no way, it's hard to get the votes. And here's a good example of a fella, when it came time to get the votes, would come together.
Thank you, Senator. Let me ask you something, because one of the things I found rather fascinating when I reached out to you about this program is that I couldn't get in touch with you by way of email. You required that I actually call you and talk to you. So my question is what impact has this digital age, this social media had on the political process and its impact on civility?
If you're like this all the time, you're not building that personal relationship.
You're right.
And of course, there's an example of it. He won't answer my calls, but he'll answer a text or an email.
mean to get back to this gerrymandered district issue, but it is such a big thing. I'm wondering if it has lessened crossover voters. You know, you talked about how it was in the 70s. I started in the 80s, and as many of my contributions as I got from Democrats, I got from Republicans, and I had just as much Republican support as I had Democratic support. And it just doesn't seem like that is the case anymore. And is it entirely gerrymandered districts, or does it get to other things such as where we get our news, and do voters distinguish between cable news and entertainment or news? You know what I'm saying? I guess I've got some follow-up questions about that general theme, but where people get their news, do you think that has affected this as well?
It's all of the above. Certainly, a democracy, in order to be able to work, you have to work from a common base of information that people will generally accept. If you do not have that ability to accept this information, then it's going to be hard to get agreement. It's going to be hard to listen to the other fellow and his point of view. And so the more that is accentuated by virtue of how people get their news is clearly one of the contributing factors. Who among us reads the newspaper cover to cover? Well, good for you. Is it just the Ledger, or are you reaching out into other sources of news as well? And so this is the problem. So you can pretty well, when you go into a household, if they have it on a certain cable TV, you can pretty well tell their politics right off the bat. That makes it more and more difficult for us to govern between the 40-yard lines.
We've also asked the audience to participate. If you have a note card and you want to write a question, go ahead at your convenience. We'll pass them down, and we'll have somebody collect them here in just a minute. Senator, one of the things that we've seen, and most recently in the last election, only 13% of the registered voters showed up in a primary in New York. The citizen participation is declining significantly. And one of the things that we're focusing on at the ACPL, of course, is civic engagement. And my question to you would be, how do we go about, I mean, we obviously did something wrong within the last couple of decades that has, I mean, we haven't always had a great turnout. But when we get down to only 13% showing up at a congressional primary, something's gone wrong. What would you recommend to this next generation as a reason to why to get involved in this process, and not only register to vote, but get involved in elections?
And Rick, this is another answer to your question of why this drift to the extremes. So, who turns out and dominates the partisan primary election? And increasingly, we are seeing in the Democratic Party, the left is more motivated and organized. In the Republican Party, the right, I'm talking about more to the extremes of both parties, is more motivated and activated. And as a result, you will end up with a party nominee that represents more the extreme of the political spectrum than the more moderate. It's because that you produce candidates in a general election that are so polarized that the choice is not more in the middle, and as a result, it's much more difficult. to build that consensus when you actually have to govern after the election. A good example of this, I can give you an example of Democratic primaries. I can give you examples of Republican primaries. The phenom that is occurring today in the Republican Party is that there is such a devotion to the president, and the activation and the money and the insistence of the people that turn out in a low turnout Republican primary are demanding of the Republican eventual nominee that they take that position, and that's it. So you take somebody like Mitt Romney that has been dared to speak out, and Mitt Romney just got elected for a 6-year term. And he is Mr. Hero in his state. So he's not threatened, and he's not threatened with money because of his personal wealth. And as a result, you're seeing others, however. I'll give you an example. One of the most bipartisan people that I've had the pleasure of serving with, particularly when he was the best friend of John McCain, was Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is facing a Republican primary in South Carolina that if he dares diverge from Trump, he knows he's going to get it. And thus, he has made that choice that he wants to continue in the Senate, and that's his judgment as to how he does. I can give you examples in the Democratic primary as well. So I'm giving both sides here.
There are a lot of young people in the audience, and I'm hoping that they have civic interest. I assume by their presence they do. Any advice to them on how they could get involved?
Well, first of all, you have to answer the question. Am I in this for me, or am I in it to serve? And of course, you ought to be doing that in whatever occupation you're approaching. But particularly so public service. Do you want to be served, or do you want to serve? And if the answer is the latter, then you're definitely a candidate for public service. And it doesn't make any difference what public service position that would be across the board. Local, state, federal, and so forth. Give you an analogy. If you're a military officer, and we have a number here, are you there for your own aggrandizement? Are you there to be an example as a leader for your troops and to look out for their welfare? It's the same thing in public service. I was just blessed that not only did I have that heart for public service and always have ever since I was in high school, but then I was able to have a group of people like the ones that you just met that could handle the public service in a job far beyond what I could do. And they are so good.
Go ahead, if you wouldn't mind, if you've written down a question, would you pass it to the center of the aisle, and we'll have some students come by and pick those up. Senator, you talked about being interested in politics in high school, and I can relate to that. Was there anything in particular that motivated you? Was there an event? Or was there a person? Or what would you say was the genesis of your interest in public service that started at such an early age?
When you were in high school, did you have a Kiwanis-sponsored Key Club?
Actually, we did. I was in the Lions Club. I was in Leo.
I was in Key Club.
Well, of course, back in the dark ages, Kiwanis sponsored the boys' Key Club and the girls' Keyettes. Later, they merged, as they should have. But it was a service organization, a service to your community and to your high school. This organization ended up having a profound effect on me, not only in high school, because I got involved into the political part of Key Club International. But years later, when I come home from the Army to practice law in my hometown of Melbourne, I go out, I join the Kiwanis Club, and I go out to the high school, and it's in the middle of Vietnam, and all the clubs, the social service clubs, had disbanded. And so I talked to the school principal to see if I could get it started up. And as a result, we got a great little Key Club started, and later, that next spring, I took them to their state convention. And at the last minute, they had a cancellation of the speaker. They asked me to speak. And I called up my college roommate who was practicing law in Jacksonville. Bruce Smathers was my college roommate. And I said, get a date. I have a date flying in. I'll make the speech and we'll all go out on the town. And Bruce brought Grace. So Key Club has had a big impact on my life. Great.
Just before we leave the political intrigue issue entirely, I have a question about the political parties. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a Democrat raising a certain amount of money for the Democratic Party, a Republican elected official raising money for the Republican Party. The parties need a certain amount of money in order to function, and they have a role. But it sure seems like members of Congress are required to spend an inordinate amount of their time raising money for the parties. One, is that true? And two, is it healthy? And three, if it's not healthy, is there anything we can do about it?
It's not so much raising money for the party, it's raising money for yourself to be able to be competitive in the next election. And when you get in an election that is as big as the third largest state in the Union, and you're talking about millions of dollars, and you go around scratching with your little tin cup, trying to raise the nickels and dimes for that kind of size of a budget just to run TV. If you want to run 1,000 gross rating points in Florida in every TV market for 1 week, it's going to cost you $3 million. Just 1 week, and 1,000 gross rating points is not a heavy buy. It's a moderate buy. So you see, and that's just TV. So you see what it's become. And it's gotten to the point that what are being elected are people of enormous individual wealth. One of the exceptions, by the way, I think in this Democratic primary right now for president, is the billionaire is still polling at 1 or 2%. money talks and money influences elections. And it's becoming all the more accentuated because now everybody does not get their news from television in a campaign like they used to. And so now we have the Facebook ads and digital ads and the campaigns. All right, now if that's not enough, how about now the influence outside of the United States, of foreign countries? Russia did it the last 2 times. You watch. There are going to be other countries that are going to get in on it this time. And it's very subtle. It's placing an article that people believe, they're reading online and they believe it, that it's true. And it may have nothing to do with the truth. And of course, this works both ways, against both parties, as we will see. And as we are seeing as we speak, as Zuckerberg is testifying in front of Congress. And where this is all going and still protecting the freedom of speech, the First Amendment freedoms, is all going to be tested in the future, and it's going to be severely tested. Because if you can't have an election that there is a basic reservoir of what is and is not fact, then it becomes very dangerous as to what the outcome is going to be on misinformation instead of factual information.
This is a strange question, perhaps. Any advice on how to pick a news source? How do you know who to believe? Well, one of the things I've found myself doing is turning off the cable news. It's just more of the same. It just goes on and on and on. And often, the people up there rendering their opinion don't know half as much as I know about the issue, and yet they are being the ones that are communicating out. I think you've got to find a good, reputable news source. I'm not trying to play to the home crowd, but the Ledger, one way or another, is going to be fairly good at the end of the day. You get into your national biases, but the question is, you've got to work your way through those biases. And so where can you get good information? I always enjoyed the town hall meetings, and this is instructive. I started town hall meetings when I was in the state legislature. I continued them vigorously when I was in the House of Representatives. When I was elected to the Senate, I started it as well. I'd go into every county. I'd go into the little bitty counties. And that give and take. There are a number of locally elected officials here. Whenever local elected officials came to Washington, I always was available to talk to them because I enjoyed it as much as they did because I'm getting the information from the very people that are elected to be the leaders back home. But what happened along the 18 years that I was in the Senate is, particularly in the summer of 2009, when everything got white hot about health care. And it was hard to have a town hall meeting because people were there to disrupt, not to have the informal give and take that you normally would. Now, I got to tell you a story about how we handled it in one case. There's a little county up in northwest Florida called Jackson County. The county seat is Marietta. And this was back at the time when
we could do earmarks in the appropriation. And they had needed a new fire truck, and I had helped them get a fire truck. So they wanted me to come and see the fire truck. And so we decided to have the town hall meeting in the fire station. And they moved the trucks out. And this is when it is really, really hot, politically, about the Affordable Care Act. Otherwise, that was derisively known as Obamacare. And so I get there with our staff member, and there is a contingent of protesters, all with placards and banners. And so I said, well, this is going to be a rather sporty town hall meeting. And so I get inside the fire station, I'm talking to the chief, and they had moved the fire trucks out of the bay and had set up seats in there, and they probably had, this little bitty rural county, they probably had 100 seats. And they were all filled. And as I walked in, all the protesters are standing in the back. So we get on into it, and we go for an hour and a half. And it's civil. I'm making sure I'm not calling on the protester. And we get to an end of an hour and a half, and it's a genuinely good give and take. And so we adjourn the meeting, and I get back into the fire chief's office, and I said, Chief, how in the world did you keep everybody so calm? And he said, we were polite to them, and we had the sheriff stand right next to him. So now they are mad because they haven't been able to confront them. And they have found our staff's car. And the poor staff member, Liam Bannister, is in the car, and they're beating on the hood and on the roof. And the fire chief goes out there and he says, Senator, I know what we're going to do. You come with me. We go out the other side. We get in the fire truck that I had gotten for him. And he takes off, and I get to see in a demonstration ride the fire truck that I had helped him in.
I think we've got some questions from the audience.
We do. Someone has asked, when you began your political career, what was the biggest challenge you faced? Well, I was just happy as a clam. I was scared to death because it was the election of '72, and at the top of the ticket was Richard Nixon and George McGovern. And I knew that George McGovern wasn't going to get many votes in my legislative district, which was all of Brevard County. It was a multi-member district back then. All of Brevard County and the eastern half of Orange County. And so Grace and I worked it like dogs. We'd knock on doors, and she'd be standing there with me, and it didn't take me too long to know that I was wasting her time. She was so good. She was a natural, and she was a brand new bride. So I put Grace on the other side of the street, and we'd go down opposite sides of the street, knocking on doors, and we could cover twice as much territory. And I've got to tell you what happened to Grace. She came to a house. She couldn't get to the front door because of the sprinklers. And she's this new bride, and she's approaching every front door with a messianic mission that she's going to get the votes for her husband. And so she can't get in the front door because of the water. But the garage door is open. So she walks into the open garage, into the inside door, and rings the doorbell. It's not the doorbell, it's the garage door closing. And she's stuck in a dark garage. And
She didn't know what to do, so she just bangs on the door, hoping somebody's home. Sure enough, the gentleman of the house is there. He opens the door. There's Grace in his dark garage. She didn't know what to say. She says, "Sir, will you vote for my husband?"
That's great. Someone has asked an intriguing question, honesty in advertising, and maybe this gets to the need to have some money to fight back. But how do you confront lies and last minute, I think what they're asking is there any way to rebut lies or last minute mailings? That's the word, mailings. And is there any way to prevent this? I'll put my glasses on.
It's very difficult, particularly if you don't have the money in which you can respond in that medium. And that is all the more difficult in a state as big as ours. It would be a lot easier, as some of our colleagues in the city council here, to respond in a more confined area. But it's very difficult. And there again is, now this is not the first time that lies have been used in American politics. This is as old as the country is, indeed as old as the history of civilization, wherever there was an attempt to have some kind of election. By the way, another contributing factor to one of the polarization is when Hamilton and Jefferson were going with each other, communication was slow. And it was the cooling saucer principle. The hot coffee that was going to burn you had a chance to cool off. Communication is instant today. And now communication is not only by the airwaves, telephone, and so forth. It's a very impersonal communication. By email, by text, by Facebook, and all of the other apps. And it's much more difficult to root out the truth in those circumstances.
I think someone in the audience has an interest in running for office. This person has asked if you do have an interest in running for office, and I'm going to paraphrase this to some extent, do those opportunities just all of a sudden present themselves, or is there something you can do to go out and try to make it happen?
It could happen either way, but what my recommendation to you would be is prepare yourself. First of all, examine yourself. Are you in it for the right reason? And then, if you got your mind set on a particular thing, prepare yourself. And really bone up on the issues. And whatever it is, try to articulate what your feeling is about those issues. And go out and start talking to people. That was what was so wonderful about going door to door. You learn a lot about life when you force yourself to do things in life that ordinarily you would not do. And normally you would not go and knock on 20,000 doors in life. But each of those doors, you learn something about if the person was home. You learn something about humanity. Just the way they presented themselves. Whether or not it looked like that they were having a rough life, the smells that came out of the open door, and then something you really learned about was dogs.
We all have some door-to-door stories about that.
Yes, sir.
I have what would be a really good last question, Dennis, but do you have a question before you would like for me to do that? This person has asked a poignant question, and that is with
people paying respects to a congressman that is lying in state that one of his ranking Republicans, whichever way it was, because he used to be the ranking member and the Republican was the chairman, they were very good friends. And that's why they're making such a deal about this congressman's death, because there's such respect. It's the same thing that happened with John McCain. Why did, not only was he a real hero, which everybody instantly respected that, but the fact that John was somebody who reached out to others, even though he was a very prickly personality. But I always got along with him because I looked beyond that prickly personality to see the core. And the core was a patriot. And I knew that's somebody you do business with. And that's why John had such the respect that he had. And you can go on throughout government and come up with those kind of people.
This ends my part of the program. So, Senator, you are a son of Florida, and you have always served for the right reasons. It's been a pleasure for me to be a part of this. Dennis?
Before we close, I'm going to catch two people off guard. I'm going to ask my wife Cindy and Rick's wife Julie to come forward just for a special recognition. Cindy, I'll let you guys take the podium.
Very well. Sorry, I've been making notes. To try to be prepared. Let's see. Grace, Julie, Answer, and I, as fellow spouses, would like to recognize you and honor you and share our appreciation for being a supportive and enthusiastic partner and spouse with Senator Bill Nelson. Most of us here tonight have families and friends and spouses who have been generously loving supporters to each of us. Tonight, Grace, I would like to thank you for crossing the political aisles and always offering thoughtful and kind words of encouragement, advice, guidance, and wisdom to me. And I'm sure that Julie would say the same things, except for the aisles. Same one. Now where am I? Let's see. As fellow spouses, Julie and I know that you have kept your chin up when Bill and sometimes you had to miss precious family birthdays and celebrations. And you've been very understanding of the limited and unpredictable family vacation time, etc. Grace, on the other hand, in 40 years, you have willingly attended more VIP leadership dinners, White House balls, picnics, and receptions than we could ever imagine. Thank you for respectfully acting as a U.S. ambassador as you and Bill traveled internationally. Grace, thank you for your endless support to Senator Nelson, often taking the back seat, and I like to say sitting in his bleacher, along with most of us. Grace, you are an exceptionally beautiful person. Thank you for not only supporting Bill, but your favorite charities and good causes on your own. Thank you for your boundaryless friendship and for setting an amazing example to all of us. Please accept our sincere appreciation and know that our prayers for you and Bill are for continued good health, success, and real happiness. Please accept these lovely, join us, and please accept these lovely flowers. What a privilege it's been. We've been married 47 years. We're so grateful that our staff family is here tonight
We feel like our right arm's been cut off because we're not with you every day, dreaming together and pushing in the same direction on behalf of the people of Florida. But I just want to end with this one thing. I know we all feel concerned about what's happening in our nation. The alienation, the division, sometimes even the hate, the disrespect. And it is about our leaders, but it's about us too. Bill and I see it across the state and across the nation as much among the people as it is among our leaders. So I just want to say, let's examine ourselves and be the change that we want to see in the world. Cindy and I were texting today, and I said, I just so appreciate her. I appreciate both of these families for how they have conducted themselves in public life to bring the integrity and the character and the love for all people. But when Cindy and I were texting, I said, I still believe in love. And I know that sounds naive, but you see, it's the only thing that works. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for honoring them.